Kia ora and welcome to Shared Lunch, brought to you by Sharesies. I'm Helen Mattison. Today we look at the perspective of the UK's fastest growing energy supplier, Octopus Energy. We ask, what inroads has Octopus made since it's been here in New Zealand? Does the electricity sector allow for fresh competition? And how much will technical innovation help solve our power problems? In a moment, I'll be joined by Octopus Energy's Chief Operating Officer, Margaret Cooney. But before we get started, here's some important information.
Investing involves risk. You might lose the money you start with. We recommend talking to a licensed financial advisor. We also recommend reading product disclosure documents before deciding to invest. Everything you're about to see and hear is current at the time of recording. Welcome,
Margaret. Lovely to have you in the studio.
Thanks for having me.
Now, before we dive into who Octopus is and what you're doing here in New Zealand, let's look at your background. From what I can gather, for about 20 years now, or probably more, you've been in the energy sector in various guises. I think you started off as an analyst in the market and regulatory scene. You've worked for Meridian, Power Shop, Flick Electric, I think you consulted for and the like, and obviously a big stint in the UK. What is it that fascinates you about the electricity sector or the energy sector?
Look, I think the electricity sector is really interesting. It obviously underpins our economy. So I think that's important to me, that it's a really well-functioning sector, but also we're in this phase of significant change. So the economics of energy are changing significantly. The need to decarbonise our economy is really important, and I think it's a fantastic growth opportunity. So it's a really interesting sector to be a part of. And I feel really fortunate that I've had some amazing opportunities in the sector. So, early on in my career, I was involved in setting up Power Shop, which was a very innovative company and really brought the benefits of smart meters that had just been put into many New Zealand homes, brought those benefits through to consumers for the first time. But I think that early experience of doing things differently, of driving change, that's something I've tried to continue in my career as well.
So that leads us to Octopus. So give us an idea of how long you've been here and really what's your point of difference?
Yeah, so Octopus has been in the New Zealand market since 2020. We initially set up here to service a bunch of technology projects in the APAC region. So we've actually got a team of about 150 in New Zealand, and the vast majority of them don't work on anything to do with New Zealand. They're actually providing support to our operations globally, or there's a team, Kraken, that's increasingly separate from Octopus now, who are helping transform energy businesses in the APAC region. Some of them are working on the Meridian project close to home. We have a few things going on. We have a small retail business as well of 7,000 customers. We would love to grow that, but we've been very clear that the current market settings don't work for us to grow that. So it's been experimental, I guess, to date.
So we look at the backers of the company too. It's a private company, the parent being obviously in the UK. You've got some big backers like Origin Energy, which is out of Australia, they're listed.
Yes.
You've got Tokyo Gas, who I think you're working with to deploy Octopus Energy in Japan, is that right?
Yes, that's right. We've got a joint venture with Tokyo Gas in Japan. Their market got liberalised a few years back, and so we've got entrant retailer that we're doing with them, and then we've got our technology going into the rest of the Tokyo Gas business as well.
So let's look at Kraken then, because that is what you're famous for. What does it do, for the lay person? What's so amazing about it?
Look, I think one of the big benefits of Kraken is that it's a modern technology stack, and there's accessible data, and the platform is very user-friendly. So it's the combination of those things that allow retail businesses to operate more efficiently, but also develop new products. So we're all familiar with electricity as kind of bills ending up in your email or in the post. But increasingly, there's this opportunity to help consumers shift their demand around and drive down the cost of energy for those consumers. And in order to be able to offer those types of products, you need a level of sophistication in terms of your technology stack. You need deep data, and you need tools that allow you to offer that end consumer ways of engaging and ways of managing their devices within the home. And that's really what Kraken underpins.
And if we look at Kraken in terms of its competitors, the technology I'm talking here, I mean, it's the likes of Gentrack who also work with energy companies and utilities for this smart tech.
That's right. Gentrack, Oracle, SAP, all of these big names are the competitors for Kraken. So Kraken is really a B2B product.
Oh, right,
So Kraken is sold to large utilities around the world. So the likes of EDF or, as you mentioned, Origin Energy in Australia, Ergon in Australia. So that's a product that helps them operate their retail business really smartly. For us as an electricity retailer, there's an opportunity to use that platform to deliver really innovative products.
And if you look at the percentages of where the focus is for the business, I mean, is the B2B a much bigger part than, say, as you said, the retail is quite small?
So globally, Kraken is increasingly becoming separate from the Octopus Energy operations, and that's really because we're serving so many of our competitors through that technology licensing. But they're both really significant businesses in their own right. And Octopus Energy, as a retail supplier, supplies over 11.5 million consumers around the globe. So we've got retail businesses in the UK and most of Western Europe, the Japanese one, which you mentioned, the US, and our 7,000 very important customers in New Zealand.
What about Australia?
No, we don't have a retail business in Australia.
What about generation assets? Because obviously the competition here, 85% I think are the big four, if you like, Contact, Genesis, Meridian, Mercury. They've got kind of the lion's share of the market, and they've got the generation assets as well as the retail arm. Would I know you've got generation assets in other parts of the world? Would Octopus consider that here?
Look, the New Zealand market is in the scope of the funds that we have for investing in new generation, so it's a possibility. Again, we've signalled to government and regulators that the current market settings don't work well for independent players, and so we've got lots of great opportunities around the globe, but to date New Zealand hasn't been a priority. As a New Zealander, I would love it to be a priority, and I'm forever sending my UK colleagues different projects and things that they can invest in. But I think one of the things I'm hoping that government does as part of this package of reforms that they're looking at is think about how they can mobilise all that investment and know-how from companies overseas to come into the New Zealand market.
Before we dive into the dynamics of the market and what's happening at the moment, perhaps if you can give us an idea of what you think the demand is for electricity. I mean, the likes of data centres and, worldwide, not just New Zealand, it just seems like we need more and more, but what sort of stats can you offer for that?
Yeah, so the global picture is quite interesting. So globally, we've traditionally grown electricity demand by about 2.5% per annum, but over the past year that's really ticked up, so it's almost double that
in a year. Is that AI?
It's a combination of a few things. So AI is definitely a driver, but also the cost of solar and the access to that, particularly in emerging economies, has driven rapid electrification in India, and then China is going gangbusters on electrifying, and is really an electro state now, and a real pioneer of rapid deployment of renewables, and also they manufacture so much of the products that go across the electricity supply chain as well. So the global picture for electricity is growth. The New Zealand picture is more complicated. So, most listeners will have be aware that over the past year we've had significant struggles in terms of security of supply. Mm-hmm. But on top of that, we've had really high prices since about 2018, they kicked up. And as a result of that, we've had quite flat demand. And even last year it declined because we were asking large consumers to curtail their usage. But I think we should be more optimistic about what the future and that if we can build enough generation to service the demand, then we should be realizing a significant increase in it. So we already know that there's between half a gig and a gig, depends who you talk to, worth of data centers sitting there to be built before 2030. So that's pretty soon. So when you think if we've got that much data center load, then in terms of the new renewables to match off, we need, if it's geothermal, an exact match, but if it's wind and solar, then we need about 4 times the capacity of whatever's coming on to be built. So there's the opportunity to realize those that growth from data centers. We will continue to get some increase from the residential space, and that will be driven by the rate of house builds. So we see every house that gets built, that will add consumption, and the rate at which they electrify their transport. So if you buy an EV, that will add kind of 20 to 30% more consumption onto your household. So I think if we get the clean car discount back, that might tick up again.
Yes.
We saw that when that discount was in place, we did see the more rapid adoption of EVs, but that's really plateaued recently. And I think also the economic climate impacts that. And the other thing is, we're also seeing that many households are quite cost constrained, conscious. So actual residential consumption on average is pretty flat. But it's that new build that's adding to the system as well.
So Margaret, on a world scale then, how progressive actually is New Zealand when it comes to electrifying and putting money into renewable energy generation?
So if we look at the performance over the last decade, New Zealand, we've added on a per capita basis, so probably max about 40, 50 watts per person. In contrast, Australia is about 4 times that. In contrast again, China is probably about 10 times that. Almost 500 watts was added in the last year alone. So we've been very modest in the way that we've scaled our system, and I think that's our immediate challenge is really getting that uptick in new supply.
Beyond residential though, I mean, are we a place in the world where, if it's data centres or the like, where we could be seen as somewhere where we could generate electricity and pass it on beyond our shores, sort of thing?
Yeah, look, I think the other thing I should have mentioned is obviously we've got this need to electrify industry that's currently using gas, and that's a really immediate need. So if you think about many of those large gas users like Fonterra or others, they've got a massive shift that they need to do very quickly. In terms of New Zealand being an appealing place to come and set up, look, I think the Minister of Finance has talked about one of the most common complaints she has is the price of energy in New Zealand, and that has been prohibitive in recent years. But when we look at the cost of building new electricity generation, actually we should have some confidence that we should go after these opportunities, and really our challenge is getting ourselves into a position that we're building ahead of the demand, so that we don't have the crazy prices that we have had.
Okay, let's look at the sector. At the moment, we've got two reviews, a sort of parallel, if you like. I think one of them is with the Minister for Energy, that was done by Frontier Economics, and that was focusing on the whole sector really, over many things. And then obviously the Electricity Authority and the Commerce Commission have been looking probably more at competition and whether or not the big four, the four gentailers, really have a sort of a dominance that they, make it a bit unfair. Are you hopeful that there will be some change with, we've had reviews before and many of them.
Look, we're starting to see some change come through from the regulator. So we had some announcements last week about changes, which we think, they're just announcements of consultation at the moment. Yeah. So I'm loath to kind of put too much stock in them until we've seen the detail.
Yes. Yeah.
But the signal is really positive.
Good.
We've had real problems with the contracts market that actually underpins the trading between the big gentailers and between independent players and large industrial consumers. That has not worked well, and that's probably not a surprise when we've got so much vertical integration and such dominance in the sector. But it has been frustrating that these are kind of well flagged issues. They're not new, but the regulatory response has been too slow. But look, the Electricity Authority's moving at pace now, and I think our job is to work with them to try and make those rules as effective as possible. The Frontier review, we're all yet to yet to know what's in there. We've heard different snippets about this idea of thermal coal, nationalising some of the thermal assets. I think though, the priority needs to be on how can we get out of this current build after the demand cycle. Or waiting. We need to break that cycle. But also I think generally the sector has been resting too much on its laurels and been quite complacent about a deteriorating situation. So there will no doubt be I think there needs to be some changes in there around the governance of the industry and the monitoring of security of supply, because very scarily in a dry year last year we got down to days of coal stockpile left, and for such a critical industry, we can't run it like this. We need to be making sure that we have that downside risk covered, because that's what ultimately costs New Zealand businesses so much, either in the price that risk translates to in terms of higher prices in the market, or having to shut down their production, which is bad. If we can't make stuff and ship stuff, we can't earn money to build the hospitals and roads and things that we need in New Zealand.
What do you think of the four gentailers have got together and sort of a backup, if you like, with coal through Genesis, and they're thinking about they would have an agreement whereby there would be a backup using coal, and it's got to have Commerce Commission approval and the like, but it would supposedly open the door for retailers like yourselves to have access to something like that too.
Look, keeping the generation in market is really important, because we absolutely need it.
You mean coal?
Keeping that Huntley plant in market is really critical, because we're losing all the gas generation that we have had, so we just can't afford to lose it. It's obviously not ideal that it's coal, but we've got to be pragmatic about these things. I think our preference would be for an arrangement that was more accessible for people, but look, I think we'll wait to see what the details of that are, because there's limited transparency around those arrangements at the moment. So it's actually quite hard to comment on whether they're good or bad. But I think there is a comment to be made around the suggestions that contracting will happen off the back of it. What we've seen previously is actually there's been ongoing issues around that contracting and continuous refusals to supply. So I think as part of the Commerce Commission's approval of that, assuming that happens, that they should be putting in conditions on it, that there's a commitment around the volume of trading that happens off the back of these arrangements, because I think otherwise it's a hollow promise that based on previous behaviour hasn't borne out.
So do you mean that, like, at the moment as a generation retailer you can it would appear, I don't know if this is actually how it happens, but they would be able to sort of favour their own retail arm?
That plus as some of the work from the Electricity Authority has picked up, there's been an ongoing issue of just refusal to supply, so refusal to engage in contracting and very, very low volumes of trading. So those are some of the problems that make it really unsustainable for independent generators and retailers to come into the market, because you need a level of liquidity in the market to make things work effectively.
Just on the independent retailer, generator or retailer question, I mean, a lot of commentators, particularly overseas, talk about New Zealand having about 50. Is that actually right? I mean, is that the amount of choice that consumers really do have?
No, it's not. There's 50 registered on the EA, but like some of them are random people, or it might be a local airport that's just covering the shops in that airport. So I think if you look at the level of available offers to consumers, that's actually declined significantly over recent years. So we've got about 87% of the retail market concentrated in the big four. We've had Flick go into Meridian Energy. We've had Energy Club got sucked up a few years ago. We've had Ecotricity acquired by Genesis. There's increasing contraction and concentration and less options available for consumers as a result. And I think that bears out in the data around the offers available to consumers and how innovative they are or not. And also, we have seen that when independent retailers come out of market, like last year when Electric Kiwi stopped accepting customers, immediately there was actually quite a significant increase in the prices from the big four that were on Power Switch. So I think there's a really important dynamic that independent competition introduces, that is around price, but it's also around the innovation that delivers lower cost for consumers. So that would be things like, if you look at the independents, they've pioneered things like hour of power, the use of hot water control, time of use tariffs. Each of these can actually deliver material savings to the end consumer, and we want that dynamic to continue, because one of the biggest opportunities we have in driving down the cost of energy for end consumers is actually engaging that demand side more smartly. So that ability to, if you think about your energy usage, there's probably about 60% of it that can be shifted to any time of day without it interrupting your lifestyle. And that, at the moment, that doesn't happen. And it's how do we make that happen? Because if we could shift that into the times when we've got like an abundance of wind and prices are lower, it allows us both to reduce the cost of your bill as a household, but also it will help us accelerate the rate at which we bring renewables into the energy system. And equally, a lot of the cost for consumers will be driven from how much lines capacity we need to build. And if we can do things like avoid charging our vehicles at peak, this will stop us having to invest significantly in really expensive poles and wires and transformers and things. It will mean that we can use the existing infrastructure much more smartly. So that's part of the role of retailers, is to bring more dynamicism and in a way that doesn't put the burden on consumers in terms of mental overhead, but just makes it easier for them.
Is that not happening now then? Surely there is innovation going on given the competition even between the four retailers, for example.
It's been limited, so as a result we've seen that the electricity authorities actually regulated the large four to require them to offer time of use tariffs. And they're not all the same, so some of them were quick to embrace things like hot water. Others, it's taken them 4 years to enable that for consumers, and speaking as a retailer, that's not a hard thing to enable.
Just thinking too then of investors here, given that that's our audience and the situation at the moment. I mean, there's a lot of enthusiasm about investing in energy. As you said, it's kind of the cornerstone of our lives and the economy to some degree. What would you say to retail investors when they're faced with the situation we have now? There's a lot of change probably about to happen, or who knows really what that will end up being. But if they're looking, our investors particularly are really keen on innovation and tech. And what would you say to them about thinking about where they put their money in terms of the sectors? I mean, it's apart from some of the listed entities, there's probably not that many avenues for them.
Well, it's interesting because the way our electricity system works ultimately impacts so many of the companies that your investors will be investing in. So whether it's, the refrigeration at Mainfreight or the production costs for milk powder that A2 sells, or, the list goes on. It's such a fundamental ingredient. I think, as investors, you have influence over these boards. So it's making sure that we're doing the right thing in terms of the New Zealand economy and building out the electricity sector. I think, the fundamentals mean that it's a sector that will continue to grow ultimately. And, we should have confidence that we'd all be better off by having a larger electricity market and system and more diversity within that market.
What about the risks? There's always risks with investment. I mean, particularly in the energy sector.
I think the risks in the electricity sector at the moment, the biggest risk we have is continued deindustrialisation. That's not good for anyone, and that's the current trajectory we're on. So I look at the opportunity for change as, fundamentally it should add to the possibilities for growth in the sector if we get the settings right.
What would be getting the settings right for Octopus to thrive and be a larger player, if you like, more significant player in New Zealand? Yeah.
So in terms of what I think the New Zealand needs to focus on, it's one, we need a strategy. We should, unlike many countries in the world, the economics of electrification should work for end consumers. So we don't have cheap fossil fuel here. We import huge amounts of fuel, and the more quickly we can displace that, the more money we have in our wallets and the more competitive we should be. So we should be really focused on making that change happen quickly. I think what we've seen over the past, over this decade, is that, investors in large infrastructure are naturally conservative because they've got large assets, and that is legitimate. How do we motivate them and incentivize them to invest ahead of demand? And we've seen other countries have put in place mechanisms to encourage that demand to come, that supply to come ahead of demand. So I think long-term contracting arrangements, all of these types of things should be considered for New Zealand. I think then there's a question around how that market is working, and I think some of what the Electricity Authority is working on at the moment should hopefully address that. And then we do need just better governance of the sector and coordination, especially at the moment, because we've got a really complicated situation of fast declining gas, a need to help those industries exposed switch quickly into electricity, and a need to immediately scale electricity. So I think there's only so much different actors in the market can do to resolve that, but it actually requires a bit of facilitation from government. If we had confidence about the market settings and the ability to grow, we'd be more of a mass market player, and we've got some great products that we know have appeal with the general customer. We've seen the success of them in other markets, and are excited about the potential to offer better choice to New Zealand consumers.
What's an example of one of those innovative products?
Yeah, so we've got one of these in New Zealand as well. So a zero bill home. So we are working with property developers in the UK. Basically, the cheapest time to put much of this technology into homes is when they're getting built. Yeah. But you get this incentive issue, like if a property developers building homes, they're really cost conscious. Yeah. And how do we incentivize those builders to build homes that are more energy smart? And so what we've done is we've provided a 5-year guarantee that if a new home is built and it meets a bunch of criteria, so it's got solar and battery and heat pumps, that we can give a guarantee that there'll be no bill for that house for 5 years. Obviously assumes normal consumption, but no Bitcoin miners in these properties. But that is a really compelling proposition, and it's a fantastic one for social housing developers and things. So we've been doing lots of these in the UK. We're working with a bunch of property developers here around the concept. It always takes quite long to go from concept to building properties, but that's an example where we think a simple solution that delivers great outcomes for the consumer. Another one is we have a product called Intelligent Octopus. We have actually about 10% of the UK's EV fleet are managed using this product, and basically it helps if you on your app you select I need my car by X time in the morning, and then we will determine when that car is charged based on what's happening in the market, and deliver you a much lower price in return for having control over charging it. And really excitingly, we're starting to see vehicle-to-grid capable cars come into the market at quite an accessible price point. So then you imagine that functionality with the ability to export into the grid, the energy market starts looking quite different. It would only take tens of thousands of these vehicles to totally nail the peak problem that we have. So I think there's these really exciting opportunities to use technology more smartly, and it will hopefully lower the cost of supply for all of us.
Well, great chat, Margaret. We could go for hours, but we'll leave it there. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks so much for having me. Really enjoyed talking to you.
And thanks everyone for tuning in. You can watch Shared Lunch on YouTube or follow us on your favourite podcast app. Leave us a rating or tell us what you'd like to hear next. Mā te wā.